Well, what can I say about my guest tonight? Actor, raconteur, writer, entrepreneur. These are just some of the words he can spell. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peter Cook.
Yes, sure. Yes, sure.
I was told in the dress rehearsal that I had to shake hands. That's chat show etiquette, apparently. You
a lot that way, actually. Do you know, I read in Playboy, for years and years I've been told it's impossible to catch by sitting on a toilet seat. And in last month's Playboy, and Playboy seldom lies, it is possible to catch it from sitting on anything at all. Has this chair been inspected before?
I was going to ask you, this is my first attempt at doing anything like this. You hosted a chat show once, didn't you, many moons ago?
Yes, I did, yeah.
I was wondering if you got any public reaction to it at all.
Yes, the public reaction was that I should desist from hosting a chat show. One of the main problems I found as an interviewer was an inability to hear what the other person was saying. And if I did, no interest in it whatsoever either. And Nancy Banks-Smith of The Guardian, she alleges, and it may be true, that Kirk Douglas was a guest on the programme. When he came in a fit of nerves, I said, "Who are you?" instead of "How are you?" But it didn't make any effect. He said, "Well, Peter, I'm extremely well, and I just flew in from wherever he'd flown in from and did the normal sort of number."
Did anyone ever write to you about it? Did you get complaints? Because it was a live show, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a very, very live show. And the viewing figure, there were only 3 programmes went out. And it had sort of disaster interest in that it was live and people would tune in because they couldn't believe that anything so awful was going on before their very eyes. And one gentleman wrote to me and said, accused me of being a drug addict, and found out his telephone number, and on air dialed through to this number and got the man's wife. And I said, "Hello, I'm Peter Cook. I'm on television at the moment doing a live show. Could I speak to your husband, please?" And she said, "Well, he's in the bath." And I said, "Well, could you get him out, because he's written to me and I wanted to ask him a question." And she said, "Are we on television?" And I said, "Well, you're not on television. I'm on television holding a telephone, but you're not on television. Just holding the phone doesn't actually get you on television." She said, "I'll just switch on to check." And she switched on and said, I've checked it, I'm not on television. Will you be zooming in on my husband? Because he's in the bath." And I said, "No, I won't be zooming in on him. He's in the bath. Much though I'd love to be able to zoom in on your husband who's in the bath, I can't do that. Could you get him out of the bath?" And there was another long pause. This is riveting television, you see, just holding a telephone. Looking like a right Sir Anthony. Oh, Cockney rhyming slang. And eventually, thank you, John Bindon, and good night. It's nice of John Bindon, wasn't it, to confess to Sun readers. He confessed to Sun readers that he'd never had an affair with Princess Margaret. Tonight, I'm willing to confess that as well. Anyway, finally, this punter, whoever he was, came to the phone, and I said, "You wrote in and said I was a drug addict." I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I was lost for words." It took about 7 minutes, this conversation.
Sure. Exactly 20 years separates you and I as presidents of Footlights. I was wondering...
Yes, roughly
that.
20 years. And of course, in those days, we all used to sit around, Sybil Thorndike and Oliver Milchett, Oliver Hardy, Sir Lawrence Olivier and I, and we were all dazzled by the heady wine of Marxism. And we used to sit up all night singing Das Kapital. We were idealists in those days, you know.
Who were your contemporaries? David Frost was in.
David Frost, yes, he was one of the so-called Lucan Circle. Yes, he was. David Frost was definitely there. I was about to add something to that, wasn't I? But I didn't know. He was about the place, certainly, and he was very nice.
Were there...
Oh, what else can you say? He was pathetic. He used to... You see, this is where everybody else was completely wrong, because they all thought, in footlight circles in any case, that David, you know, couldn't tell jokes or make jokes up and do anything funny, and therefore, because he was so nice and hard-working, he should be given a job of some kind. And he was given a job, and I really forget what it was. And of course, he was much better at being nice and doing things like remembering people's names and being industrious. And he was a very bright lad, and we didn't know it. I still don't, actually.
And talking of those times, people seem to think that Beyond the Fringe sprang fully born from Oxford and Cambridge, just as 4 years later the Monty Python team did. Is that the case?
No, it's not the case. I think anybody at Footlights at Cambridge now or any time since suffers because very often in the public mind, in any case, is the idea that the four of us in Beyond the Fringe, Jonathan Miller, myself, Alan Bennett and Dudley Moore, met at university, got a review together, and then went straight to the West End, smash hit, off to Broadway. When in fact Jonathan had left Cambridge before I arrived, Dudley and Alan were at Oxford, and we only met because a guy called John Bassett, who never gets any credit for this, John Bassett is the name, who is the assistant to the artistic director at the Edinburgh Festival, thought of putting the four of us together. He knew Dudley and Alan from Oxford, he knew of me and he knew of Jonathan, and it was his idea, and we did a late night review after the old Vic Seagull, and got more laughs than they did. And in fact, the year before they'd had Flanders and Swan, who also didn't go straight from university to a drop of the hat, and Monty Python similarly. I don't know which was which and where was where, but they worked for a long time separately or jointly before forming up and becoming Monty Python's Flying Circus. So it was a myth that we all sort of met at university, got up a review and were immediate stars and that.
So what did you do when you left Cambridge? You started the Establishment Club, yes, on the...
Yeah, in my second year at Cambridge, I thought, why on earth isn't there a club where they do political satire? Because they had it in Berlin and they had it in Paris and places like that. And I thought, well, it's such an obvious idea that somebody's going to do it before me. In fact, nobody did. And I was looking around for premises in Covent Garden, actually. You couldn't get planning permission for change of usage. And eventually wound up in Greek Street. And that opened with John Bird, Ellen LeBron, John Fortune, a guy called Jeremy Geit, who was the only non-university person involved, who's now teaching drama at Yale. And he was great at falling over and farting, and he simultaneously. I mean, he was an excellent person to have about because he only mimed the farting. It was not real. And what was the question? I mean, I started it.
You started, but if that's the regular team, you also had guest stars.
Yes.
You had Lenny Bruce come to it.
Lenny Bruce came over, yeah.
What was he like?
Well, he was. It was most peculiar because I'd heard his records, and he was notorious for bad language and blasphemy and so on, and obviously a very good draw. But I had no idea what he was like, and I thought it was a big American star arriving. What do we do? So I had a large car, Rolls Royce or something, and went out to the airport to meet him. So, Mr. Cook for Mr. Bruce, and if you'd like to step this way. And out came this wreck, absolute shambling wreck.
and sort of lurched into the car and insisted on playing this tape recordings of a conversation he'd had with the stewardess on the flight. And it was a very small, tiny tape recording. You couldn't hear anything. Saying, "Hey, this is terrific, terrific." You hear. I thought, Jesus, what I got on my hands. So I booked him into a hotel, which he got chucked out of because the management felt there was an excess of hookers and in his room and too many syringes down the toilet. They had a very sort of old-fashioned attitude towards drugs. So he stayed with me. It's rather like this Charlie Parker died in my arms, isn't it? Well, he did, actually. And he stayed with me in Battersea. One of my first assignments was to go and get him some drugs, which I knew nothing about. He said he had this old war wound. He'd suffered this as a Marine, and he needed stuff called Dilaudid, I think it was, which is a heroin derivative. And I had no idea how to get hold of drugs. So I couldn't call this gentleman in the bath. I mean, it was ages before that. So I thought, drugs, jazz. Do I know any jazz musicians? Rang Dudley. Dudley, any idea how I get hold of drugs at all, you know, sort of stuff, you know, that? And yeah, Junior Aspirin. Which I didn't think was satisfying Lenny's craving. Anyway, I did get hold of a few jazz people who had vague ideas of certain doctors, and I went traipsing around London till about 3:30 in the morning with this terrible phony prescription that Lenny had. I think it was a phony prescription, Dr. Ziglovich, for Dilaudid, this awful tatty piece of paper. I was wandering around to these doctors in the middle of the night, and they said, "Piss off," you know, in medical language. And I got back, and what I thought, I had a very fixed picture in my mind that Lenny Bruce, deprived of heroin, he'll be climbing up the wall, having the most appalling withdrawal symptoms, and screaming and yelling like I saw in the movies and so on, like the Snake Pit, whatever it was, with Lydia de Havilland, whoever was in that. And when I got back, he sat there quite quietly, and I said, "Well, Lenny, I'm terribly sorry, I couldn't get hold of any heroin." And he said, "Well, that's cool, I'd like some chocolate cake." And I got quite cross. I said, "I'm willing to traipse all over London at 3 in the morning to look for heroin, but chocolate cake is out of the question." I refused to go on you try and get chocolate cake at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, this is 1962, where chocolate cake was not so available. Nylon stockings were still rationed, and life was tough.
Last week on this programme, I saw John Cleese being accused of being undergraduate, which is curious when one considers he's 40 years old. You yourself are 42 in half an hour, I think. Do you still consider your humour undergraduate?
I don't know. I really don't know what I consider my humour at all. I don't know what undergraduate humour is or schoolboy humour is, or I really can't get into any of those definitions, but it's usually a pejorative adjective used by older people to describe something they don't like. And fair enough. I don't go around saying that's senile humour. Well, I might now, I've got to laugh. I didn't see the programme. I've no idea what my humour is at all.
One last thing, I'd like to ask you for a moment about...
I want to ask you something, actually.
Yeah.
I think the world should know. I was going to launch into a very unnecessary attack on Gracie Fields. And it's not just attacking her after her death, because I've been attacking Gracie Fields for years, and I never had the opportunity to attack Gracie Fields on the air, and alas, she's not here to defend herself. But now she's dead, I thought I'd attack her gratuitously. Because I read about her in one of the popular Sunday papers, and she married this guy, Archie Pitts. And it was a marriage of convenience or inconvenience. from her point of view, in that Archie moulded her. He sort of taught her everything. He sort of taught her to jump on the stage and dance and sing and worked her terrible hours, made her a massive money, but she complained about that, you see. And then she left Archie Pitts, an excellent man, as far as I can make out, throwing her on the stage and telling her what to do and having her sing Sally and all that stuff. And then she rushed off with this unsuitable band leader, Monty Banks, and he gambled all the money away that Archie Pitts had made. And then the part of her life which is really interesting is the 2 weeks of supreme happiness she had on the island of Capri with her one true love. And I think it is the Sunday People who revealed this, and she told the Sunday People reporter, "You must only tell this after my death," whereupon he shot her. No, she fell in love with this Irishman, you see. There was an artist, and they spent 2 marvellous weeks on Capri, and at the end of the 2 weeks, this Irish artist said, "Gracie," I won't do the accent because, well, I will. He said, "Gracie, you offer me everything in the world. You offer me everything a man could desire. Love, peace, wealth, contentment, fresh fish, sea views, joy, sexual frenzy, euphoria. You offer me all this, but if I stayed with you, I would lose the one thing I treasure most, my art." And he pissed off. And 25 years later, to show that he was right, 25 years later, a self-portrait by this Irish artist was sold at Sotheby's for £5. There's a lesson in that somewhere.
Well, I'm having
It's very unnecessary, isn't it, attacking Gracie Fields?
Gracie. Well, I'm having signs made of
Double
me, so I
mole,
better...
yes. Have you also read...
Oh, God, yes.
No, I've read some news today which I'm very pleased about. It's
Yeah.
Captain Scott of the Antarctic. This is why it's worth getting the Times. He's in this iceberg, you see. He's stuck in this iceberg, and the iceberg is moving away. So very soon, Captain Scott's remains, perfectly frozen, will drift out into the Atlantic and be available for historians to peer at. This is a very interesting story about Scott of the Antarctic finally making it back home. It's a very odd story, isn't it, that he's been frozen there all this time, and now, thanks to the climate, he's going to float away and get his dying wish to be cremated. I don't know.
Well, I think on that note of Scott on the rocks, we better leave. Peter Cook, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.